Hello YouTube. This is my very first YouTube video. My name is National Master Robert Plunkett and we're going to talk about chess. Anyways, I'm going to take a slightly different approach to this particular YouTube videos than other chess players take or that other chess masters take when they talk about chess. Instead of going over one particular game or one particular puzzle or one particular endgame, I'm going to talk about how you as a chess player can improve as a chess player, how you can work on your own game and you can get better at the game of chess and what tools you need to work on to do that. So for starters, instead of thinking about the game of chess as this puzzle that you have to solve, which in my opinion is kind of insane, because the game of chess itself is just too complicated to be a puzzle that you can solve. You have, on the first two moves for each side, on the first one move for each side, you have over 400 possible positions that can take place, and if you stretch that out into two moves for each side, there's over 160,000 possible positions. And once you start getting into the third move, the number of possible positions starts getting so astronomical, so insane. No human being can possibly comprehend that number of positions. Actually, you start getting to the point where no thing can comprehend that number of possible positions. So that's the first thing you got to get into your head. Chess is not a puzzle that you're going to be able to solve. So the real question we have to ask ourselves is, okay, how can we as human beings, how can we improve at this game? How can we get better? And what I've done is I've broken it down into 4 basic chess related things and then 1 non-chess thing that you can work on to get better at the game. And I've put them down here in order of importance. You have your tactics and calculations, your endgames, positional understanding, opening knowledge, and then your physical and your mental health is the 5th thing. This is the non-chess thing. These are the first 4 chess things that you can work on to get better at chess. And I've actually put them in this order for a reason. This is actually in the order of importance. And you should be spending most of your time here, your second amount of time here, your third most time here, your fourth most time here, and finally you should be spending, your least amount of time here, but you should definitely focus on this. This should be an important part of playing a good game of chess. So let's talk about each one of these things. Let's talk about what they are, why they're important, and how you can work on them. Okay, so tactics and calculation. Tactics and calculation is just being able to spot things, like being able to spot mate in 1, being able to spot mate in 2, being able to spot winning a piece, capturing a piece, winning material, okay, things like this. This is really critical. If you can't do this, you can't win a game of chess ever. You cannot win a game of chess if you can't checkmate your opponent. That's the goal of the game. If you can't do that, you can't win. I'll give you a great example. Just after the first couple of moves, let's just say white threatens the 4-move checkmate. 4-move checkmate isn't like a spectacular opening strategy. Actually, it kind of misplaces the queen right away. But let's say black didn't see that white has this very simple, very obvious threat, and he just developed a piece. Now, keep in mind, developing a piece, positional understanding, not a bad move. We got a piece out, we developed, it's in the middle, but unfortunately, that's checkmate and the game's over. So it's checkmate, and you lost a pawn. So this is a very serious problem. If you don't have the ability to calculate tactics at least 1 move deep, 2 moves deep, 3 moves deep, and actually, most of the time you don't have to go much deeper than that, you just do not have the ability to win a game of chess ever, and that's really critical. So you need that. That is the most important thing you need. Now, how can you work on your tactics and calculation? Now, here's the thing. Like 20, 30 years ago, when I was a kid and I was trying to work on these tactics and calculation, we didn't have a lot of methods to work on this, actually. The best method that we had to work on tactics and calculation is you'd get together with some friends and, you would have a couple drinks, you'd have a board in the middle of the table, and people would share puzzles with each other. We would share these tactical puzzles with each other, and that was how we learned, is we would get together and we would share these puzzles with each other and we'd go over them, or maybe we'd play some blitz games and there'd be a bunch of people watching, while you played blitz, and a lot of times we'd go over the games afterwards and they would point out, like, oh, you missed this shot here, you missed this shot there, and then you would learn these tactics as you went. And that was how we learned back then, and that was how people got good at tactics. So you needed good players around you, and you needed to be hanging out with these good players, and you needed to go over these blitz games, and that was the old-fashioned way of learning, and that was really the only way to do it. And today, we have so many more resources now. You have no excuse not to get good at this part of the game. You have chess.com, you have Lead Chess, you have Internet Chess Club, you have CTR 4.0, all of which you can go on and you can go over thousands and thousands of puzzles, and you can do them every single day. and you can work on these puzzles, and you can just rapid fire. You can just do puzzle after puzzle after puzzle, and you can get your tactics and calculation to the point where your intuition is so intensely strong, and you just don't miss any of these tactical ideas, and you don't miss any of these tactical shots. I'm amazed at how many young people I'm playing today where their tactics are just so very nearly perfect. It's just absolutely incredible to me how well they're playing. And because they're playing perfect tactics, it's going to require, if you want to get good, if you want to become a master or a grandmaster, this part of your game has to be nearly perfect. And you need to spend a lot of time on puzzles, and you need to spend a lot of time just kind of learning and training yourself how to calculate. Okay, the second thing, endgames. Why is this number 2? You hear people harp on this a lot. You hear people say, well, you have to learn the endgame. Okay, you really have to learn the endgame. And yeah, you do. You have to learn the endgame. And the reason is because, like, let's say I win a pawn. Let's say I play a great opening and I win a pawn. Okay, so I did a good job. I won a pawn. Okay, so how do I convert? How do I convert that pawn into a victory? Well, that's where your endgames come in. How do you convert this pawn into a victory? Well, you do it by having good endgames. Okay, if you have a good endgame and you're up a pawn, or you're up 2 pawns, or you're up a piece, or you're up an exchange, how do you convert? Well, if you know how to play the endgame, you know how to convert. Okay, so for these two things, for endgame and for positional understanding, I actually recommend doing it the old-fashioned way. And there's a lot of new stuff out there where you can work on these things on the computers, on the machines, and it's great for things like tactics, and it's great for things like openings. It's so wonderful to use these new tools that are available to us to work on these things. But for endgames and positional understanding, I really do recommend doing this the old-fashioned way. I've noticed that, like, with my endgames and my positional understanding, it seems to be, at this point, the strongest part of my game, now that I've come back and started playing again, and I've been trying to play well, and I've been trying to get better. These are the parts of the game I've had to work on the least, because I am still kind of, I'm head and shoulders above most of my peers when it comes to these two aspects of the game. And it's a lot of it's because I did it the old-fashioned way. And doing it the old-fashioned way gives you a really firm grip on the ideas, because studying books on how these things are done gives you these nice, solid explanations of how these positions are played. And having those explanations in your mind gives you a much more clear idea of really what's going on in every individual endgame. And I'll go over a little bit of how to study the endgames in a moment. So the next thing is positional understanding. For this, I recommend going over game collections. And again, positional understanding and openings, these two can go hand in hand a lot. You can glean a lot of positional understanding from your opening knowledge, and you can glean an awful lot of opening knowledge from your positional understanding. So you can get one from the other, and you can get both from each one. So you can study a lot of openings, and you can get a lot of positional, and you can study a lot of just games, and you can get a lot of opening knowledge, and they go hand in hand, because as soon as your opening knowledge ends, you're going to lean on that to try to figure out what to do next. So they definitely go hand in hand. But this one's more important than this one, because if you have this one, you can figure this one out a lot of times. So that one's really important. Then the next one is opening knowledge. You need to know at least enough about the opening to try to survive the first 10 moves or the first 15 moves. If you don't have at least some opening knowledge and you can't survive, you're in a lot of trouble. And I've actually gotten, this is the weakest part of my game right now. I'm playing against all these young people, and I remember it used to be very easy to get advantages out of the opening back in my day. But now it's actually become quite difficult. It's a lot more difficult to get advantages than it ever used to be, because this has gotten so much better. And a lot of it is because of the tools that are out there now to get better at this. So let's go back and let's talk about each of these things individually a little bit more in depth. So tactics and calculation. Okay, so what is tactics and calculation? It's the ability to find a combination. Okay, so I'll give you a really simple example. So e4, e5. So we're going to do, this is a combination that actually has a name. And back when I was a kid, this was the kind of combination that we would show at these get-togethers, and people would get together and they'd show their games, and they'd show combinations, maybe combinations they missed, combinations they found, and then they would show just puzzles in general. This was one that got shown a lot because it has a name. This is called Legal's Legacy, or Legal's Mate. And it's pretty straightforward. The opening, White did really well. He developed his pieces, Black didn't. He just didn't develop, so obviously White did a much better job. So the question is, okay, what does white do here? Well, when we calculate tactics, we calculate three things. We calculate checks, captures, threats. So in this case, there's a check, that's a capture, but this capture is also a threat. So we would look at these two moves, and if you look at them, after a while, and you calculate, you would notice that this move is actually a winning move. As strange as that sounds, because you would think, well, I can't do that. I'm pinned, right? This bishop is going to take my queen if I play knight takes e5. And that's true. It very well might. Another upside is that this bishop is actually hanging. This is kind of critical, because if they take our knight, we can take their bishop. And I know what you're thinking, the bishop can take the queen. Yes, it can. But here, let's take a look and see what happens if the bishop takes the queen. So that's what black has to do. Black has to play bishop captures queen. So black plays bishop captures queen, and after bishop captures queen, we're going to finish the game. We're going to play bishop takes f7 check, and that should be the first move you look at, because it's check. King only has one square to go. And then we're just going to bring in the other knight with a check. That's knight takes d5 check, and it's checkmate. So that would win the game. That's called the Gall's Legacy, or the Gall's Mate. So it's an important tactical theme to understand. I mean, you get to break this pin. You have a massive amount of development, and it allows you to do this. It allows you to get away with this, and it's something that's fairly simple to calculate. But of course, if you can't calculate that, then you can't win. I'll give you another example, and this just goes back to the checks, the captures, the threats, and this is just going to be a calculation exercise. It's actually just going to involve all checks, which is kind of strange. And this was a fairly famous game. This was between Edward Lasker and a chess player called Sir Thomas. Queen was on h5. And actually, white's last move was creating a big threat. White's last move was queen h5 in this game. He played queen h5, and he's making a big threat. The big threat is he's threatening knight takes f6 check, g takes f6, or queen takes f6, either one, and then queen takes h7 is checkmate. It's a huge threat, right? Checkmate. You can't have a bigger threat than that. Okay, so Sir Thomas, he's not dumb. He realizes he's in trouble. He was actually one of Britain's best players back then. So he played queen e7, which was a great move. He protected this threat. So now if knight f6 check, g takes f6, queen h7 check doesn't work. The queen defends. So that's pretty smart. Okay, so we're going to calculate this position, and when we calculate, what do we calculate? We calculate checks, captures, and we calculate threats. So in this case, this should definitely be the first move you look at. That's a capture and that's a check. The second move we look at should be also a capture and a check. So this should actually be the very second move you look at. As crazy as that move looks, that should be the second move you look at. And this move is the move that was played, and in fact, this move wins. So king takes queen. That's forced. There's no other move. So then this should be the first move we look at. A lot of players say, well, what about this move? Well, this move shouldn't be the first move you look at. It should be maybe the second or the third move you look at. Because this is not a capture, it's just a check. We should look at captures and checks first, and then we should look at these moves that are checks or checks using some other method. But this is a capture and a check. And it's also, in this case, it's a double check, so we should definitely be looking at this first, because on double checks, the king has to move, so we know the king has to move. If the king retreats in this case, we have checkmate. King is trapped, so the king's going to have to come up, and then the very first move we should look at is this check. Now, I have a special name for a check like this. I call a check like this a forcing check. The reason I call this a forcing check is because in this particular case, this was the only check in the position that forced only one response from black. There were other checks in the position, but the other checks in the position, there were multiple responses. Like if knight check here, for example, the king has 1, 2, 3 squares that it can go to. But with this check, the king only has 1 square that it can go to. Okay, so now that explains Lasker's next move, which he actually made not the best move. He actually made a slightly inferior move. He could have checkmated slightly faster in this position, actually. He played the weaker move, but you have to understand, Lasker, he was a grandmaster level player. Okay, so why did he play the weaker move? Why did he not find the faster checkmate, so to speak? It's because he's very good. He's a very good player, and he understood how to calculate. He understood how to calculate correctly. He looked at that strong forcing check first. He looked at this move h4 check, which checkmates one move slower than maybe we could call it the correct move. But this move is the first move that any strong player should be looking at. This is the check. There's only one legal reply to this check. It's very easy to calculate all of the moves after this check, all the way to checkmate. This move was actually stronger. And Lasker didn't see it during the game, and he actually said, I think in his book, that he didn't see it until, quite a while after the game. I think somebody else showed it to him. But this move actually checkmates slightly quicker. But notice how it's not a forcing check. There's two possible replies. You can take the pawn or you can go this way. In both cases, white checkmates a little bit faster. If he takes the pawn, we have check, and again, not forcing, he has two replies. If he goes back, then this is mate. If he goes up, then this highly entertaining castles kingside is checkmate. And no other move actually checkmates, which is funny. So that would have won. Or if the king had gone this direction, we have g3 check, king h3, knight f2 check. Not knight f2 check, sorry. Bishop f1 check first to prevent king g2, and then knight f2 as mate would win. Okay, so that was a possible way that the game could have gone. But of course it didn't go that way because, again, Lasker's a good player. So Lasker understands. He understands, okay, I want to play this forcing check because I can calculate that very quickly. And as soon as he calculated mate, he said, okay, that's the move I'm going to play. And he did it because he wins the game. And it's a brilliant game. It looks absolutely beautiful. There's only one forcing move here, king f4, g3 check. Again, only one legal move, king f3, bishop e2 check. Again, only one legal move, king g2, rook h2 check, king g1. One legal move, one legal reply on each of these moves. You can't get a much simpler calculation than this. And then at this point, just to stay true to history, Edward Lasker had the option of castling queenside with mate. He hadn't moved his king or his rook at this point in the game, and a lot of people will take a little poetic license here, and they'll castle queenside for mate because they think that's really cool. In reality, he did not do that. He played king d2, which is also checkmate. So just to stay true to history, he checkmated with the rook, and it's a debatable. I mean, maybe it's a little aesthetic too. He checkmated with a piece that had never moved, so that's a score one for the rook that never had to move, and it developed. And it's an interesting thing in chess. Rooks are about the only piece that can do this. They actually develop, more often than not, they develop without moving, and they're one of the few pieces that develops this way. So it's kind of interesting. But yeah, that was checkmate, and that's a great example of how tactics and calculations work, and how we should approach tactics and calculations when you're solving your own puzzles. We're looking for checks, captures, and threats. So that's basically what we're doing. Okay, so we're going to go and we're going to take a look at the very next thing we're going to take a look at is we're going to take a look at endgames. Okay, so how do we study endgames? More importantly, why are endgames important? Well, endgames are important because let's say you're up a pawn. Like let's say I'm up just this one pawn right here. And I want to win this highly simplified position where that's all I'm up. I'm just up this one pawn. So we're going to take all these pieces off the board, and we're going to reduce the game to just this king and this pawn versus this king. Okay, so we have a king and pawn versus this king. This is a very simple, very classic chess endgame. Okay, so how are we going to win this position from here? Well, in this case, I need to understand like a lot of endgame concepts. I need to understand opposition. I need to understand outflanking. I need to understand how to get ahead of my pawn. I need to understand how to escort my pawn to the end of the board so I can get it to the end of the board and I need to make a touchdown. So in this case, I would get opposition and then I would outflank. We have a special word for both of those. And later I'll try to do a couple of lessons, maybe a couple of exercises on the endgame that will show you a little bit deeper on how to do some of this stuff. There's actually one very interesting exercise that I'm going to do maybe in a later video that I will show you how to get opposition. It will actually have no pawns on the board, and it will explain opposition, outflanking, and of course Zugzwang, which is another very important endgame concept. It's a German word, means the compulsion to move, which is very important, especially in endgames. So in this case, I'm just creating territory to push my pawn up the board. Okay, so I can push it, right? Okay, so then I push it again, and actually here I have opposition. I just gained it, which is kind of interesting. And then I need to get to where I have opposition again, and then I need to get to where I can escort my pawn. And at this point, I'm covering the last three squares for the pawn going down the board. At this point, I would take the pawn and I would make it into a queen. And once I get my pawn turned into a queen, I I would proceed to checkmate with a king and queen versus a king. And this is a very basic endgame, and you can learn this from a lot of other videos. I'll go over it kind of briefly right here. I'll go over the easiest method. In this case, the simplest method, like let's say it's white's move here, you would just take the queen and put it a knight move away from the king. This is not the most efficient method. The most efficient method is to constantly try to reduce the box area that the king has, and to do this efficiently regardless of whether the queen's a knight move away or not, and to move your king if necessary and just keep reducing this box. This is not necessarily going to be the most efficient method. It is the fastest method, especially if you're in a blitz chess situation or a time pressure situation where you need to use this method. Maybe you only have 10 seconds to win the game. It happens a lot in blitz. And keeping the queen a knight move away will corral the king to one of the edges. You don't know which edge. It's up to him which edge he goes to. But once he gets to the edge, you just take your king, walk it towards his king. You get opposition, throw your queen in front of his king, and it's mate. It's really straightforward. So like if he goes here, you would just, again, knight move away. You don't have to think about it. There's other moves that might be more efficient, but this is fairly straightforward. When the king gets on the edge, you lock him on the edge. That's all you care about. He's on the edge. Good. Now we get over here with our king. We get opposition. Whichever direction the king goes, in this case he can only go one. We just take our queen, put it in front of his king, boom, mate. Simple. Okay, that's a simple method for checkmating with the king and queen versus the king. There are more complicated methods, and there's plenty of videos on how to do this. I'm not going to go over it terribly deeply right now, because I want to cover some of these other things. I want to cover a little bit about positional understanding and a little bit about opening knowledge. Let's talk a little bit more about how I would recommend studying the endgame as well. So, like I said before, I recommend old school approach to studying endgames. You want to take a look at books, you want to take a look at things that have good, solid explanations on how to study these endgames. You can do videos on endgames, they have them. You can also get online and you can do endgame exercises on places like iknowchess.com's got several endgame exercises that you can do. There's endgame lectures. I might cover some endgames as well. But just good old-fashioned books, a couple of books I would recommend. Dvoretsky's Endgame Manual. Very good endgame book. You want to get this if you can and go over it. A lot of the great endgame books, unfortunately, are kind of difficult to get. Yuri Averbach did an endgame series that was absolutely phenomenal. I'm not sure how easy they are to get. A lot of them are out of print. Here's another one that's actually also phenomenal. That's also, I think, out of print. This is called Mastering the Endgame. It's got 2 volumes. This is by Shereshevsky. Very good. Also difficult to get. I mean, you got to go online on Amazon and try to pick up some copies of these, but they're difficult to get. They're out of print. But I think Dvoretsky's is still in print, and it's a really good one. And there's plenty of other really good endgame books out there. And the thing about endgame books is they're great because they give you really good, solid explanations about what's going on in a given endgame, and it really helps you get better at the endgame when you don't just go over this endgame, you actually understand it. Okay, so next thing is positional understanding and opening knowledge. Now, positional understanding and opening knowledge, these things actually go hand in hand. Okay, so you can actually get a lot of positional understanding from opening knowledge, and you can get a lot of opening knowledge from positional understanding. So the thing from these two things is a lot of this comes from, the positional understanding especially, comes from looking at complete games. Okay, and this is really important. You need to spend a lot of your time looking at complete games. And there's I would recommend actually purchasing some game collections. And there's several game collection books out there that you can use. Let me go ahead and just reset this real quick. So a couple of game collections that you can purchase. Bobby Fischer's My 60 Memorable Games. This book is back in print. This is probably one of the best books ever written on for a game collection by the World Championship Robert J. Fischer. I'm reading this book again. I've read this book several times. It's very good. And you'll get some opening knowledge from this too. Some of the stuff in here is actually still relevant. Certainly the first 10 moves of most of his games is still very relevant. Another book that you can get with good game collections. This is a book called Zurich 1953 International Tournament by David Bronstein. And these two books, My 60 Memorable Games and Zurich 1953 by David Bronstein, these two books are probably the two books that I think every strong player, just about, like every master and above, has read at one point or another during their chess career. So you're going to want to read those. There's other game collection books that are out there. There is a book called something like The World's Greatest Chess Games Ever Played, and that's actually a very good book. And they've got a lot of very good a lot of very good games in there that you can go over, and it'll give you a lot of information as well. So you want to go over complete games, and that's going to help you a lot with understanding, okay, where am I putting my pieces? What are the plans? What happens after the opening's done with? What are my plans? Where are we going? Okay. So one thing about positional understanding is, and you'll see this in a lot of games, it boils down to two things. You have positional understanding, I could also add maybe strategic understanding. What's the difference between positional and strategic? I mean, these are two words that get thrown around a lot, and not very many people understand what they mean. Even very strong chess players, most of them can't tell you the difference between positional and strategic, and do they have any differences, really? I mean, it's kind of semantic. Is there a difference between a positional idea and a strategic idea? And one of the best explanations I ever heard was from another strong player. He said, well, I think positional has to do with pieces, and I think strategic has to do with pawns and plans. So if you have a strategic idea, it's a plan. If you have a positional idea, it's more like I'm creating a bad piece or I'm creating a weakness. Okay, and that's a positional idea. But strategic is like a plan. And strategic has to do with your pawn structure, because your pawn structure defines your plan. And positional has to do with your pieces, because your pieces define, how you have a permanent weakness or not. The simplest examples I can give is, let's just take a very basic opening. This is called the French defense. This is the advanced variation of the French. And okay, we've each played 3 moves, and already we have a very clearly defined positional plan and a very clearly defined strategic plan. Okay, and that's kind of interesting. Only 3 moves have gone by. We have a positional thing going on, we have a strategic thing going on. Positionally, since we think, okay, position has to do with pieces, we have a bad bishop for black on c8. And that's positionally what's going on. And strategically, we've already decided where each person is going to attack. White's going to attack over here on the king side because he's got more space over on the king side, because that was defined by this pawn structure. And black's going to attack the queen side. Again, defined by the pawn structure. It's easier for black to get his pieces over here. It's easier for white to get his pieces over here. So positional, strategic. Okay, so there you go. White's also got a positional problem. He's got a bad bishop, but this bishop is not as bad as this one. This bishop can move out. This bishop is really blocked. So black is going to be putting a lot of effort into trying to get rid of this bad positional piece. White would like to get rid of this bad bishop as well, but maybe he'll put less effort into it because it's clearly not as bad. Okay, so that's positional and that's strategic understanding. And again, we can get more of that by going over chess games and by going over complete chess games. So now we get to this one, opening knowledge. Okay, now keep in mind, computers today, they don't have these things to a great degree. The computers' endgames are actually, if you get past the table base, if you get past the 6-piece table base, which obviously a computer will play a 6-piece endgame perfectly, because they have all the moves in there. When you get down to a certain number of pieces, you can actually see all the moves, and they have what they call a table base, where they literally play perfect chess. If you get just a little bit past where they play perfect chess, their endgames really aren't that good. If you play some chess computers online, if you get to endgames with lots and lots of pieces, they have a really hard time understanding how dangerous a passed pawn is, for example. They have a really difficult time with that. They'll move pieces around. And sometimes, the human player can move this passed pawn all the way up the board. There was this super strong computer that never lost a single game, and then eventually he lost this one game to this international master. And the reason that the computer lost the game, the computer was up a whole piece, and the international master just kept pushing his pawns. And the computer could have stopped these pawns, but it just did not understand how dangerous they were until it was too late. They actually don't play endgames very well. Computers only do these 2 things. They do this and they do this. And then they do endgames when it gets down to 6 or 7 pieces. They play them perfectly. But then all the endgames in between those 6 or 7 pieces and those middle games, they don't do very well. They don't understand things. And also they have none of this, and this does not apply, obviously, because they're machines. So this is all they do, and that just shows how important this is. Because this is all they do, and yet they just don't make any mistakes right here. They don't make any tactical mistakes, they don't make any calculation mistakes. And here we're looking at machines, and if we look at machines like a person that's training to become a game of chess, we have these glaring weaknesses here and here. But it doesn't matter because they've got this and they've got this nailed down, and they've got it nailed down so solidly that they are so much stronger than the best human player in the world. The best human player in the world is like 2,800 plus. The best computer in the world is 3,000 plus. And it's because they've got that. And they've got it perfect. They just do not make mistakes. And their openings are perfect. I mean, they remember everything. Okay, so that's the thing there. Now, we get to opening knowledge. Now, back when I was younger, it was really difficult to get good at openings. And the only way that we could do it was we would have all these informants and all these new in chesses, and you'd get these things in like a room, and you'd get a notebook, and you'd get a pen, and or a pencil, and you'd write all this stuff down, and you would sift through all these games, and it would take a long time to get the opening knowledge that you needed. I mean, it would take like 20 hours to find one move. This had its advantages and its disadvantages. The advantage of it was okay, you could remember that move once you found it. I mean, it took you 20 hours to find E5, on move, 7 or 8 or whatever. And of course, now you're going to remember it because it took you 20 hours to find that move. You're never going to forget that move. Another plus side was it took 20 hours for me to find it just to compile the data. Guess what? It took everybody that amount of time. It was so hard to do the opening work back then. I would actually swap these. Back then, 20 years ago, opening knowledge and positional understanding, I'd swap these. The opening knowledge was actually more important. That's one of the things I think that really Fisher understood, was that opening knowledge, you can move that up the list a little bit a few years back because it was so hard to obtain it, and it was so hard to get it. It wasn't readily available to everybody, and you had to put a ton of work into it, and it took hours and hours and hours of sifting through books the old-fashioned way just to get the information. Okay, and so today, I mean, you have a huge advantage. You have all these tools now. You have ChessBase. You got you have chess engines. You can get a ChessBase app for your phone that's super cheap. It's like $9 or $8 or something, and you can get a free ChessBase database online, or you can get a free database, and you can actually just email PGNs back and forth from your ChessBase app to your free chess thing that you've got on your computer. And you can email them back and forth. And I do it this way, even though I own the highly expensive, full ChessBase, which you don't have to purchase because you have so many other tools now. You have free opening classes that you can take online. You have free opening videos that you can look at that are online. Everything is just so available now on the opening knowledge front that just about everybody can get good at chess. I've started playing chess again recently, and I'm trying to get better at chess. And this is, I think, my biggest weakness right now, is opening knowledge, and it's because the information is just so readily available. Everybody's playing the opening so well that it's harder for me to get an advantage, where it used to be very easy for me to get an advantage. And that was very difficult. The upside of when I was younger, it was very easy to get advantage because, oh my God, who wants to do 20 hours of work to find one move? So when you did find that move, you were pretty sure that nobody else had found that idea, or nobody else had found that move, or very few people knew about that move. And you could just do the work, and you could find the move, and you could win. Fisher actually beat Reshevsky fairly quickly in a game. It was a pretty famous game, actually. It was in the Accelerated Dragon, and that's what he did, is he just researched it, and he knew Sammy Reshevsky was still playing this move after castles, kingside, pretty well known, bishop b3. Sammy Reshevsky was still playing this move, knight a5. And all Fisher did was he just did some research, and he found a game in enough format where white had won after e5. It was either a game or a piece of analysis or something, I don't remember, but he didn't actually find this move on his own. He just found it. He just read it. And it just took so much work to find this information. It wasn't readily available. Now you could just look this up on a database, and it would instant pop up. You'd have it, and everybody would know about this move. But it was just this cool idea, this check, and then if king takes knight e6, traps the queen, and if king takes knight, queen d5 leads to checkmate. That's kind of a long checkmate, but queen d5 check, king f5, g4 check, king here, rook g1 check. I'll just show it real quick. And again, the queen has nowhere to go, and if pawn takes, you have queen takes queen. But, okay, so king takes, queen d5 check, king here, g4 check, king takes g4, rook g1 check, and 3 different places we can go, but we have 3 different checks we can use. We have queen d4 check, queen d1 check, queen e4 check, not queen f3 check, but queen d1 check. So looks like queen h5, obviously not queen f3 check, because the rook. So queen d1 check, queen g4 is made. So, he won this game. Actually, in the game, again, to stay true to history, Sammy did see that king f7 was not the world's greatest idea. Once bishop f7 was on the board, he noticed he was in deep trouble, and he played rook takes f7, and after knight e6, he played pawn takes and just gave up his queen, and he played for several more moves because he just really didn't like Fischer, even though he probably should have just resigned. Even at this point, he should have given up. Okay, so that's opening knowledge. And okay, so the last thing, the physical health and the mental health aspect of the game. So I'll spend a little bit of time talking about this. So physical and mental health. How can I discuss this in a way that makes any kind of sense? Well, it matters. If you're alert during a chess game, it really matters. You're going to play a little bit better. It's something that non-chess players tend to attribute to about every loss to. They attribute it to your physical health or your mental state. Like, were you overconfident? Were you underconfident? And honestly, this is one of the least reasons that you would ever lose a chess game. It's usually one of these 4. Even if you were overconfident or underconfident, if you got to pick between one of the two, pick overconfidence. You'd much rather be confident when you go into a game of chess than underconfident. I've seen underconfidence lose a lot more games than overconfidence. So be overconfident is much better. But if you're healthy, if you're alert, this gets more difficult as you get older. I think older players, we tend to get more fatigued, we tend to get more tired. The longer tournaments really drag on us. We start falling asleep at the board. We start losing our ability to focus, losing our ability to concentrate. We have to get up and walk around more because maybe our joints or our back doesn't feel as good while we play. So I think this becomes a bigger issue as you get older. When you're a young player, so many non-chess players will attribute it to, you moved too fast, or you weren't focused, or you weren't paying attention. Look, you're a kid, you've got nothing better in your life to do. You're probably pretty focused even if you don't look focused. So this is 9 times out of 10 not the reason you lose a game. Usually it's one of these 4 things. It's you made a tactical miscalculation, you misplayed an endgame, you didn't understand the position where you were in, or you just made a massive opening blunder. And that's why you lost the game. It's usually not because of this. This is the least likely reason to win. That being said, this is important. You need to be able to sit at a chessboard and stay intensely focused for a very long period of time. But as long as you can do that, then you should be able to play a great game of chess. If you are having trouble doing that, typically you need to work on your physical health, and that typically helps with your mental health. If you can just get to a healthy weight, if you can get to a healthy diet, and you're healthy enough to where you can play a good solid game of chess, then you're usually doing okay, and you need to spend the majority of your time focusing on these 4 things so you can get good at chess. And I hope that I've explained these concepts enough. I hope that I've kind of gone over, how you can improve as a player and as an individual, and I hope this helps you with your own game. And this is my very first YouTube video, so be kind. If you liked it, go ahead and put a like, put a comment, subscribe, or whatever people do on YouTube. And I'll try to keep the videos coming. I'll try to make more videos. And thank you. Thank you for listening.